Hello, ACEF participants. My name is Damilola Ogumbi, and I am the CEO and Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair of UN Energy. There is no doubt about it. COVID-19 has changed the world as we know it. However, even before the pandemic, progress to meet universal energy access was too slow. Last month, the latest data on Sustainable Development Goal 7, access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy by 2030 was released. Despite some progress, this year's tracking SDG 7 report is clear. We are not on track to deliver the SDG 7 promise on time. 789 million people across the world still lack access to electricity today. What's more worrying is that 2.8 billion people still lack access to clean cooking solutions globally. While COVID-19 creates a major challenge, it also creates a major opportunity to reset the global energy transition, address slow progress, and focus our collective efforts to meet the SDG 7 challenge. As the world continues to rebuild from the pandemic, we are faced with a unique, once-in-a-generation opportunity to recover better. Countries that seize this moment to rethink their energy supplies will develop a competitive advantage. We know that the future global economy will be powered by efficient, renewable energy. There is no better time to move away from energy systems of the past and unleash a renewable revolution. Renewables provide cheaper energy and produce 3.5 times more jobs than the fossil equivalent. Some countries have already recognized this opportunity. For example, Malaysia has included clean energy in its 4.7 billion stimulus package. This commitment is expected to create 1,400 megawatts of solar power generation, 1.5 billion in private investments, and 25,000 jobs. Investing in clean energy will also deliver health, agriculture, and gender outcomes, helping to ensure women and girls benefit from a green recovery. As countries seek to recover better, there are 8 key dimensions that need to be established in order to ensure a successful transition. The first one is create a supportive business environment that ensures investments are driven as fast as possible. Set robust policies and empower national institutions to drive the development of renewables. Increase electrification and access to clean cooking. Invest in data. Move towards cost-reflective tariffs. Eliminate fossil fuel subsidies. Declare a moratorium on new coal-fired power because renewables are cheaper. Invest in energy efficiency. And then finally, invest in the people so they can take advantage of new clean energy jobs. The benefits of recovering better with sustainable energy for all are clear. Demonstrable return on investments, a more resilient economy, healthier people, and a cleaner environment. Every investment to recover better also helps place the global economy on a trajectory in line with the Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goals. Today's decision will impact our ability to recover better over the long term. We look forward to working with you all to seize this unique moment and keep the promise of sustainable energy for all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Damilola. Moving on to the first part of our program on understanding the impact of COVID-19 on energy access. We will have 3 short presentations and another short pre-recorded video. To the audience, please do send any questions that you might have at any time. We will be collecting those questions and we aim to answer them during the discussion session later on in this session. So let's start. I have first the pleasure Let's start. So I have the pleasure to introduce Mr. René Failagutan, a champion for renewable energy from the field. René is the general manager of Romelco and CEO of Cantingas Mini Hydropower Corporation. René is also the president of the Association of Isolated Electric Cooperatives, which is an association of 41 cooperatives, mostly located in the island provinces of the Philippines. So a pleasure is mine to introduce you, René. Over to you.
Thank you, Mikhail. Good morning. Thanks to ADB and to Sustainable Energy for All program for having me in this session to share with you the experience of the electric cooperatives in providing electric service in the remote villages and the Philippines under the COVID-19 pandemic. This usual crisis brought by the COVID-19 pandemic has compounded the already challenging task of the 121 electric cooperatives in the delivery of electric service to remote islands and isolated communities in the country. Under COVID-19, several issues and challenges emerges in our operation. Fears and confusion among personnel and member consumers. This COVID-19 pandemic has struck fear among the employees of getting infected and has taken its toll to the morale of the employees. Consumers were afraid to go out from their respective houses. We also experienced cash flow problem due to community quarantines and lockdowns. Collection efficiency have dropped significantly from 50% to 60% and has brought tremendous pressure to the financial conditions of the electric cooperatives. Jobs were lost. Thus, residential consumers have diminished their paying capacities and relying to government aids. During the quarantine period, electric consumption of residential consumers had increased significantly, which people find it difficult to pay their bills. Operational difficulties was also encountered, particularly in the procurement and delivery of supplies needed for power facilities in the remote communities and in the billing and collection activities of the electric cooperatives. Further, the crisis also delays or even suspend of ongoing projects, on which projects that suffered most are towards energization of isolated communities. What are the response measures that we have put in place to continuously provide service to the communities? First, we prioritize the concern of the employees. To ease their fear and confusion to the employees, we have invited experts to conduct orientation and lectures on how to avoid contracting the disease and prevention of the spread of the virus. We have modified operational protocols like the localization of workforce for the collection and maintenance works to minimize impact of the travel restriction in the operation. We have done this in remote islands like Cobrador in Romblon province and Malalison in Antique province, which are both recipients of ADB funding. We also provide financial relief to our consumers, like the deferment of collections and allow the 4 monthly installments on the payment on their power bills. We also provide 1 month free electricity to all Lifeline consumers consuming less than 50 kilowatt hour per month of electricity. For consumers that are using prepaid metering system like the Malalison project, the electric cooperatives have reverted back to postpaid service. Likewise, electric cooperatives have developed their own sustainability plans. We give importance to preservation of cash and redefine budget priorities. We also defer some major capex projects, although we understand this would delay some electrification projects. In the absence of the vaccine and better knowledge about COVID-19, all we can do is to prepare. Moving forward, we have developed major activities to carry out our mandate. First, to strictly implement health protocols. This is a preventive measures among the employees and the member consumer owners of the electric cooperatives to avoid contracting the virus and the disease. We also need to ensure continuous service to vital establishments. We will also facilitate transition to renewable energy technologies. COVID-19 has proven that renewable energy technologies can be less affected in the disruption on the supply chain in the power industry. We will also focus to increase energy access to households in remote areas. We believe renewable energy can provide solutions to electrify those about 2 million households which still unenergized in the country. And the association is helping the electric cooperatives in capacitating them financially and technically. And finally, to seek financial support and engage with our government, especially in developing a regulatory environment that would support off-grid electrification. Our government aims to 100% electrification by 2022. And all electric cooperatives are the willing partners to take up this challenge. I do hope my narratives have given you clear pictures on how the electric cooperatives in the Philippines serving the remote and off-grid areas was able to survive and how it planned to sustain its operation under this new normal environment with COVID-19 as part of our daily lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rene, for your insightful presentation, very concise and clear, highlighting the issues and the challenges, the immediate responses, and the recommendations moving forward.
Thank you.
Hello, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to join you at the Asia Clean Energy Forum for this important discussion on energy access. My name is Dymphna van der Lans and I serve as the CEO of the Clean Cooking Alliance. The Alliance works with a global network of partners to build an inclusive industry that makes cooking accessible to the 3 billion people who live each day without it. At the Alliance, we believe that no one's life should be limited by how they cook. Yet globally, 3 billion people depend on polluting open fires or inefficient stoves to cook their food, harming health, the climate, and the environment. We've long known that household air pollution from cooking increases vulnerability to respiratory infections like pneumonia and worsens respiratory illnesses like asthma. New research suggests that people exposed to air pollution are more likely to die from COVID-19 than people living in areas with cleaner air, further increasing the dire risks people in developing countries face from this global pandemic. Beyond the disquieting public health linkages between energy access, air pollution, and COVID-19, the pandemic is across the sector. A recent Alliance survey presents grim findings. COVID-19 is severely disrupting the progress of companies, researchers, investors, and policymakers, all of whom are critical to building a vibrant ecosystem able to achieve universal access to clean cooking solutions. We saw that nearly 1/3 of the survey's enterprise respondents have temporarily ceased all operations or will do so imminently, that 80% of investors have delayed financing decisions, and that 54% of research organizations have had to delay activities. Of course, we expect that the weeks and months ahead will see the immediate disruptions give way to new long-term realities. While the impact of COVID-19 has been and will likely continue to be profound, there is room for optimism. Governments can and must make clean cooking part of their pandemic emergency response plans. This includes designating clean cooking as an essential service, decreasing costs of consumers through tax reductions, and supporting companies in mitigating supply chain disruptions. Governments must ensure that short-term responses do not undermine long-term public health goals. We must partner with policymakers to ensure that clean cooking is prioritized on the political agenda and that beneficial tax and tariff regimes are established. Clean cooking must be part of an integrated energy planning across the globe. We must recognize that clean cooking solutions are critical to reducing household air pollution and building people's resiliency to respiratory illnesses. We must ensure that people are aware that cleaner cooking options exist and that they see value in purchasing and using them. We must support the clean cooking companies that are pioneering scalable business models and high-impact technologies. We must continue to grow the universe of attractive commercial opportunities within the clean cooking supply chain, whether in technology, manufacturing, distribution, retail, consumer financing, or some combination thereof. We must motivate investors to deploy flexible financial resources and urge donors to invest in clean cooking for its countless benefits on climate, environment, livelihoods, and gender. We must look for opportunities to crowd in partners in adjacent industries. And we must think creatively, collaboratively, and quickly about how COVID-19 recovery plans can unlock the innovation, financing, and partnerships needed to reach SDG 7. Looking ahead to 2030, I'm hopeful that if recovery efforts prioritize energy access, the clean cooking sector will be well positioned to both reduce future risks and build a more sustainable world. One where no one's life is limited by how they cook. Thank you for having me join today and for highlighting this critical issue during the Asia Clean Energy Forum.
Thank you, Dymphna van der Lans. The short video there was from the CEO of the Clean Cooking Alliance, a close partner of Sustainable Energy for All. So it was a pleasure having her aired this morning here too. Thank you, Dymphna, once again, and the entire team at the Alliance. Continuing on cooking, a warm welcome to Ben Jeffries, another voice from the field. Ben is the CEO of ATEC Biodigesters International, which provides patented pay-as-you-go enabled biogas digesters to passionate farmers globally. Over to you, Ben.
Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are. I'm Ben Jeffries. Thank you for the introduction, Mikhail, CEO of ATEC Biodigesters. We provide plug-and-play biodigester systems to small-scale farmers in Cambodia and Bangladesh. And that provides farmers with 1,300 litres of clean biogas per day for cooking, as well as 20 tonnes of organic fertiliser per year. So I've been asked to come and just give a quick presentation on the impacts around COVID, particularly on a social enterprise business model like ours at the moment. I've included here just a little bit of information on sort of the problems we're seeking to solve. I'll assume everyone can see the screen and have a read of it. The interesting thing with a biogas system or a biodigester is that you're solving both an issue around clean cooking, which I believe we're quite aware of, as well as an issue around soil degradation and supporting the agricultural livelihood side as well. In particular, this is a big issue in countries in Southeast and South Asia, such as Bangladesh, Cambodia, and Philippines. So as mentioned, just very quickly, our systems is basically a plug-and-play system that can be installed quite quickly on site. We then now have it connected up with a patented PAYGO setup as well, which means that customers are able to, rather than paying cash up front or go through the challenge of trying to use an MFI, they can actually just use mobile money. In Cambodia, that's Wing Money. In Bangladesh, that's soon going to be Bcash, to basically be able to pay off the system using mobile money over a couple of years directly back to us as installment payments. We launched that last year, and that's been going quite well, but interestingly brings a whole new level of risk to the business model as well there. So just moving through to the main part of the presentation, which is around the impact of COVID. So I think in my situation or ATEC situation, as well as many other startup social enterprises, we've seen, unless we're in an essential service related to something that's linked right to, say, critical food supply or medical supply, etc. What we've seen is in the short term quite a significant drop off in new sales. That's probably been the first major impact we saw come through from COVID. So we saw that starting to come through around sort of end of February, early March in Cambodia. And we saw a significant slump going into March, around about a 95% drop off at that point of time. The good news, if I talk to Cambodia specifically first, is that that's started to recover. Cambodia has been doing quite well at this point of time when it comes to the response with COVID and the impact of COVID within the country. So we're starting to see that starting to recover now, which is excellent news. That's particularly great with our technology, given that there's a direct link between switching to biogas and improved lung health, which also increases a person's resilience to the impacts of severe COVID as well, as Dymphna would have just mentioned. So for us, that's good to see that starting to turn around. In Bangladesh, we're still seeing the lockdown there went for longer. It's still a bit more wait and see period in Bangladesh. The countrywide lockdown has stopped, but we're seeing regional lockdowns at the moment. So for example, our country director in Bangladesh is currently in a lockdown zone within Dhaka, meaning he's not allowed to travel at this stage. So hoping to see that change soon. After we got that initial shock, the second part was obviously, and I'm sure everyone's been the same, is around adapting our staff to be able to work effectively from home or in appropriate social distancing ways. Thankfully, we just rolled out a new meeting rhythm approach around using Zoom and doing daily huddles and doing it all digitally. So thankfully, that was quite straightforward for us in making that move to having a more decentralized team. And then the third part, which is what I mentioned, or have the slide up here for, which was the new risk that came about since doing PAYGO, is effectively we are not just a sort of sales and distribution enterprise anymore. We're also a financing enterprise, doing the credit terms through to customers. We are the first globally to do this in the biogas sector, and we see huge potential. There's around 200 million small-scale farms globally that could have a biodigester. So for us, this is very exciting, but it brings a whole new layer of risk. So I've included up here what's called your portfolio at risk evolution. And so this is from the microfinance sector and used in the PAYGO sector as well, of looking at how many days in arrears are the percentage of your customers. So what we saw, so that means they've still got the system, but they've not paid and the system is currently switched off. So here's just a sample of a period of time we had around our portfolio at risk, showing if they were between 0 and 6 days that they hadn't paid and it was switched off, those who had gone to 7 to 13, all the way up to 90 days plus. So you can see there, basically, we had very low numbers before we hit the COVID period. We did see that bring up. So we saw a peak of portfolio at risk above 0, getting up around the 8% mark. I'm happy to say that that's now down around about, I think the latest was at 0.7%. So we were a bit of concern there for a period of time, but we proactively took out some new payment options for our customers, so that if they did lose their job, which is one of the big concerns in Cambodia, is more the economic risk, they had the ability to restructure their payments short term. And thanks to our investors, beneficial returns lead to a one and Red Hat impact for working with us on the debt side to make that a reality as well. So for us, it was really a situation of having to move quickly and be agile in offering new promotions out to customers, as well as being flexible and restructuring payment terms for existing customers. But we're starting to see the benefit of that coming through, and customers keen to sign up and keen to keep paying to keep that access going for biogas and organic fertilizer. So thank you, everyone. Mikhail, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you very much, Ben, to have shared those experiences with us this morning. Dear participants, please keep sending those questions. The team here is collecting them, and we're going to aim at answering many of them, if not all, later on in this session. So next, I have the pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Praveen Kumar. Praveen has more than a quarter of century of experience from the clean energy space, and he's currently the India coordinator for GOGLA. And GOGLA is a global association for the off-grid solar energy industry. It was established some 8 years ago and already represents over 180 members as a neutral, independent, not-for-profit industry association. So, Praveen, we look forward to hearing from you next.
A very good morning to all the listeners, and a big thanks to ADB and SE for all for inviting us here today. First of all, I wish and pray for everyone to be safe and healthy wherever you all are. And we know these are trying times, and therefore, today I'm here to speak on behalf of GOGLA, which is, as Mikhail said, an association of grid solar energy industry. So we'll speak from that perspective as to what's going on here. But yes, these are trying times, and we have to ensure that energy access amidst COVID-19 goes on and goes on beyond, so that we reach our SDG 7 goals. So the first thing I'll be talking about is the impact of COVID-19 on the off-grid solar energy industry, basically off-grid energy industry, but the background is more on the solar side. So what GOGLA did, because we work very closely with our members, and as Mikhail said, we have got about 180 of them across the globe. So there was a survey done in March 2020, which sort of brought out these very, very stark kind of findings, which said that, out of 10, if there is, the level of disruption here is about 7 out of 10, which means that basically 70% of all the off-grid energy sector players that we are working with, and these are mostly the smaller ones and some of them medium and large scale, but mostly these are the small companies. So the level of disruption is about 70%, and they feel that there is a huge pressure on them because of COVID in terms of reduced sales, reduced payments, fundraising, of course, becomes harder, and supply chain challenges, as we know, because as we heard Ben also saying that in Bangladesh still there is a lockdown to some extent. India is still bad. From where I'm speaking to you, by the way, from Mumbai, India. So therefore, the supply chain challenges still remain, and they were even more when we did the kind of the survey. So 50% of the companies more said that they would not be able to survive beyond 3 to 4 months if there was no support coming from them. And there was immediate financial trouble, of course, for the smaller ones. Now, what we basically see is playing out in the long term is that there'll be reduced incomes, and therefore ability to pay will be constrained from the consumer side. We'll say a few investors will be sort of looking to taking risk, so there'll be lower risk appetite. So in the sense, the investors will also looking for safe kind of bets, better business models, stronger business models, long-term play out there. So that's going to be really important. We can see going forward also there'll be long lasting operational and supply chain disruption. So now the things are going to be changed as we go along. So now what we see today also, that is there is a need for specialization, and you have to create a kind of new value into the entire system, including the last mile network. Now, what we have seen, the concern from the next few months is that the biggest actually concern was when we started talking to our members was about people being laid off. So the loss of jobs was one big constraint. Because as we know, I mean, these players who were just starting to take off would require capital, and there's a small debt requirement from kind of the smaller companies, which we can see here is about which in terms of value is about less than 200,000 euros. That's in total about 35 to 40 million dollars sitting out there, which is not available to everyone, and that creates the challenge, because then how do you sustain your business in these tough times when everything is almost to come to a halt. Now, having said what's going on today, now we have to look at what the governments, organizations, in terms of the kind of multilaterals or other organizations like the COGLA, and also the private sector have done during these crisis times and worked toward resiliency. So what we have seen that in governments in Asia and also in Africa, for example, you see countries like Kenya, Rwanda, Zambia, and so many others have actually spoken with the governments and got things done. For example, when there was a big lockdown, it was made sure that kind of the off-grid energy companies are classified as essential services, and therefore people could move around and distribute the energy. And more important, the distribution and new distribution was also the point about taking care of after-sales service, because things can go wrong during COVID, and how to and that was more important because there was no reliable energy if it is there in the last mile rural, and if something goes wrong, how do we support them? And this could also mean kind of impact on the health services and the health of people. So that was something that was done. Packages have been announced across in India and Kenya, and they're not merely towards off-grid sector, but even if it's MSMEs, a lot of them qualify as MSMEs, and therefore they have been able to gain out of it. Loan moratoriums have been announced. For example, in India, there was 3-month loan moratorium. A lot of these pay-as-you-go companies, for example, in Africa, for example, require that kind of support because there is money not coming in from the consumer, and therefore, how do you pay back to the banks that you are kind of you need to pay back? So that was 3 months moratorium was announced in several countries. That was a very strong government action, and in general, there's any support for the energy and the RE sector. In terms of other organizations, for example, Gogla, we try to do a lot of technical assistance work with people. So is Power Africa, PFAN, Clean Cooking, and so many other associations have been doing that. In Gogla, if you go to the website, you can see we have got a resource center. So has IFC got a page like that where you can actually go and see what's going on. So we try and support people with information, because I think that's one of the key messages that we can give to the members. If you can't really go and stand with them, at least stand with them in terms of knowledge sharing. 60 Decibels is a firm that's going to, in collaboration with Gola and Toon Foundation, CDC, CGAP. So we are trying to do a consumer experience survey. And of course, there has been a relief fund initiative with Gogla and so many other kind of financial institutions. So that's going to try and help the smaller players in terms of some kind of a easy debt, and so that people can stand up on their feet for the time being. In the terms of private sector, we saw the pay-as-you-go companies working closely with consumer to reduce the pain, which could include, payment cycles being changed, and support in terms of other work that can be done with them, so that they do not feel the pinch of the whole situation now during the lockdown, etc. A lot of pivoting we have seen in the business model. So there are a lot of smaller companies who have been off-grid solar energy companies, but they have, for example, gone into FMCG, which is the fast-moving consumer durable distribution in rural areas, because both the things match. The consumer needs products to survive. It could be food items, and these companies had got their distribution spread out there, so they could actually take the role of distributing other products rather than energy products. So that pivoting has happened. This had helped them to survive. There's some income coming in, and therefore they can sustain their businesses. Communications is very very important. People have been talking to their partners, lenders, supply chain, etc. And diversifying, I would say, is the ask of the hour and the need of the hour. So people have been sort of trying to see what else can they do. For example, if I'm a solar lighting company, can I also get into health services? Can I try and do something for lighting up the health centers or providing energy services to health centers? And for example, there are 35-40,000 of them in India, which require off-grid energy support to keep them sort of running and for use for the people. The final slide and the final kind of things I'll be speaking about are what are the opportunities going ahead. So we need to be on target for our SDG 7 goals by 2030, and therefore we have to keep going. And as somebody says in the industry, we have heard people saying that it's a black swan event. So it's not like it's not like a everyday event. This is a big event and this is a big crisis, but this will go away. It's not like it's going to stay with us. So having said that, we can see a turnaround will happen in the medium term. Government support has to be there. For example, Indian government announced that they will not budge from the target of 175 gigawatt of RE capacity, that's the renewable energy capacity, by 2022 target. So government has to stand behind the sector and sort of say that we are there and this will go on. So do not worry. New opportunities have come up in and are supposed to be coming up more in the health, agriculture, and other sectors. For example, a manufacturer can now do freezers for vaccine. There could be more energy usage of grid in, for example, water pumps, solar home system, productive use appliances in rural areas, etc. opportunity for off-grid to make communities resilient by powering community assets. So what we can do as off-grid sector players is to work on the healthcare, school administration, etc. in the rural areas to make them more resilient and to come out of this situation unscathed as best as possible. There has to be a focus on coexistence, so better in play between grid and off grid, because grid is there, it's going to be there, but when the situation is like this, when you don't know what's going on, especially in the deep rural and the needy areas which actually need energy more because it's not visible out there, so you need to have a better interplay with the grid facilities. We have to have low cost and nimble organizations going forward, because we have to be able to pivot as soon as there is a requirement. Working remotely, digital transformation is going to be a ask again going ahead, because that's the way it's going to be. As we know, social distancing will have to be maintained for a long time to come, so we'll have to adapt to these new sort of methods of living and working. And finally, I would say that for example, the relief fund that I spoke about, and that can be seen on the, for example, information on this and more can be there on the Gogla website for people who want to go and see there. So there are 370,000 jobs in the sector as we see from where we stand, and that has to be maintained. Relief has to go in so that we keep on running towards the path to SDG 7 goals. So that's where the perspective is from our side, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Praveen and Gogla, the Off-Grid Solar Industry Association. There's a lot of good data there for decision making, so I appreciate that presentation. And as you mentioned, Praveen, much more to be found, also including the immediate response initiatives on your website. So thank you. Moving on to the second part of our program this morning, which is under the theme of building momentum for a better recovery. The benefits of recovering better with sustainable energy for all are clear. We have demonstrable return on investments, we have a more resilient economy, healthier people, and a cleaner environment altogether. So it's my pleasure to start this part of the program with a highlight presentation from Mr. Adhikari. Mr. Adhikari, he is the Executive Director of the Alternative Energy Promotion Center in Nepal. And looking at his bio, his experience with all aspects of renewable energy is very hard to match. It's therefore a privilege for us to hear his presentation about the government's energy response plans in the off-grid areas in Nepal. Mr. Adhikari, welcome.
Can you hear me? Can you see my presentation as well? I have shared it, yes. You see my presentation? Good morning and namaste to everyone. Thank you for inviting me on this event. There was some technical problem. I could not catch up with some of the previous presentation. As introduced, I am Executive Director of this Alternative Energy Promotion Center, which is a focal agency in Nepal to promote renewable energy technologies. I'll just jump directly to the agenda now. In the current situation, the present situation we have in Nepal, we have reached around 78% with the national grid, which is promoted by Nepal Electricity Authority. AEPC was working for the last 33 years, and we have reached to around 80% of the population on the off-grid areas, but around 8% is overlap between the grid and the off-grid, as you can see in this Venn diagram. So net off-grid solutions are 9.75, and then we have around 12.5% of areas where we still need to go. So the off-grid is one of the main solutions to provide cleaner and greener energy to many parts of the country. As you know, Nepal is as a mountainous country. Transportation is very difficult in many places, and because of the economic conditions of the investment capacity, big projects are not taking off. So we are very much active on remote off-grid area with the off-grid renewable energy solutions. So in terms of policy focus, these off-grid solutions are also mainstream in the policy document. We have these National Planning Commission's 15th five-year plan very clearly gives the targets of criteria. We have Ministry of Energy produce a white paper which clearly shows that we have to have a combined effort from on-grid and off-grid sides. We have rural electrification, renewable energy subsidy policy, which gives government subsidy to remote areas. And recently we have aim to electrify the whole nation by another 3 years. And we have this Ujalo Nepal program, which is again combined both in on-grid and off-grid. And we have a very clear mini-grid guidelines where solar and hydro mini-grids can be developed in the remote areas. And then we have support from ADB and World Bank working on this area on the different models. And of course, the Nepal Electricity Authority, which is the main utility, is also aggressively working in the remote off-grid areas. We commissioned a study financed by ADB recently. The final draft report is already there. The report shows this kind of chart that the last year's excess was around 74%. We have now 80%. Then we have a plan to go to 2023 as 100% electrification, where 93% is covered by national grid, and then 7% will be covered by off-grid. So this 7% is dedicated to off-grid solutions. And then when we move to 2030 to meet the SDG goal, then we plan that 99% will be with the on-grid, and still there will be 1% permanent off-grid because of the country situation. So this is the kind of plan we have now in hand. So we are working on this area, this statistics. And then Minigrid Initiatives promoted by Alternative Energy Promotion Center. As you said, we have 4 or 5 off-grid initiatives where we have different kind of model to finance and manage. We have 4 models undergoing. That first one is the regular subsidy to hydro mini-grid and the solar mini-grid, which will be basically run or developed by cooperatives, communities, and it's mixed finance by private partnership also. Principally is the government subsidy and then community and cooperative financing, owned and operated by community. Then we have this new effort which is dedicatedly designed for getting electricity to all by 2023 by off-grid mini-grid. So we have involved local and provincial government, and we have financed it to up to 100% to reach to last miles with the mini-grids. Here the subsidy will be 90%, or the financing will be 90% from the federal government and 10% from local government. And it will be principally under the ownership or under the jurisdiction of local government. And then we have this ADB supported SASEC project, where we working both on mini-grid and solar mini-grid and hydro mini-grid. Basically community owned. We give them around 60% subsidy in case of hydro and 90% subsidy in case of solar, and then the rest will be developed by cooperative, financed by cooperative. They will have their own tariff system, and then they do their productive end use of electricity, and they sustain this project. These are also almost in the last stage. We have successfully run this project, making 10 mini hydros and then around 15 solar mini grids. Then we have another initiative from the World Bank, where we are basically promoting private sector to invest in off-grid areas, where the financing mix is around 60% grant from the government, then the developer ESCO has to arrange 40% the investment. We have the fund with the low interest rate up to 30% out as a concessional credit, and then 10% equity must come from the ESCO. So basically, the ESCO will manage these things. So these 4 models are under working, and then we use these 4 models to cover everyone interested to invest in off-grid solar and hydro mini grids. And of course, there will be isolated standalone home system also where the mini grids will not be there. That will be covered by the general subsidy scheme. In general, I think the issues I can see from the off-grid areas are how to maintain them. We have already developed around 2,000 hydro mini grids, which are running from a range of 20 years to the still under construction. The main issue is how to manage them, operate and manage the technology. We trying to involve the local government to take it over, because the community developed system have always a problem. When there is a major failure, major disaster, then the investment should come from somewhere to install these systems, to repair the systems. And now we, as I said, we are planning to go to cover everyone by 2023 to all in 3 years time. So we have jointly working with AEPC and NEA. We are developing around 200 mini grids, principally the solar mini grids, and financed jointly by all 3 level of government. And of course, there will be standalone systems in the dedicated isolated areas. This is mostly the state finance to cover the last 10%, which have nothing in hand as such. And then a third issue is the grid connection of the mini grids. We have done some pilots. We are 5 hydro microgrids are connected to main grid. The connection of the small microgrid to the main grid has some issues related to the power purchase, technical issues, the technical compatibility of small system and a big system, safety and security, and then the PPA rate, power purchase rate. So these issues eventually comes up once these isolated mini grids are encroached or cast up by the main grid. So in my opinion, we had a very long and good history of off-grid solution in the mini grid, basically hydro. Now we are moving to solar also. These are the typical problems we have. And just to bring a small issue related to COVID, we had a very, very severe situation when there will be a spread of pandemic, and then there is no electricity. So I think the off-grid solution, portable renewable energy solution, small mini grid are the best and the very, very fast deployable solutions in such cases. So we are also planning here if these things spread further. But I think that the importance of off-grid solutions and portable energy access solutions has been highlighted by these COVID things. This is our understanding, and I would like to stop here. If you have any further question, I'm happy to substantiate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adhikari. Indeed, some concrete action and clear plans going forward. We look forward to having you join the panel discussion in just a few minutes. Moving on to the final 2. Parimita Mohanty is next on the program. She's the Management Officer at the Asia Pacific Office of United Nations Environmental Program. Parimita is a real champion in sustainable energy, women's entrepreneurship, and climate change. She has a PhD based on microgrids, distributed generation for microgrids from the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi, and more than 25 publications in various international peer-reviewed journals to her credit. So empower, build back better with women in climate-sensitive sectors. Parimita, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mikhail. Good morning, good evening, depending upon the location that you are. It's our pleasure to be here in this very special session, spotlight session. So today I will focus on our findings from our Empower project, what we are implementing in 3 countries, in Bangladesh, Cambodia, and Vietnam. So I will be presenting from a whole Empower team point of view. So Empower is a joint project between UNEP and UN Women, and it is funded by CEDA. So the overall objective of Empower is quite huge, but keeping the very purpose of this session, I will focus more on the renewable energy and the women entrepreneurship component of Empower. So what we are trying to do under this component is to create and promote women entrepreneurship and women enterprise through renewable energy. And we want to showcase that how renewable energy can be considered as a tool for climate resilient livelihood generation and for promoting women entrepreneurship. So this is what we are trying to do. So if you see the whole picture here, so all the women being shown here are either the women we are working with currently, or we are intending to work with them in future. So this is all from our Empowered sites photos. So in order to do that, what we are trying to do is we are working at the policy and planning level, both at the national and subnational government. We are working on need-based skill development programs. And we are also working on creating evidence on the ground by establishing pilot demonstration project and creating business models which would be sustainable and scalable in nature. So that's the objective of Empower. So while we are doing this Empower project and almost in the middle of carrying out the pre-feasibility studies and trying to develop the business plans, the COVID-19 thing happened. And since we are working so closely with the community and for the community, we thought that let's understand the problem that the community is facing because of COVID. So we did a preliminary assessment in these 3 countries and in the participating provinces and try to understand their challenges in terms of their employment, in terms of health and well-being, and the social protections. Of course, besides this, we also had several stakeholders consultations to understand the challenges that the small RE businesses are facing, particularly in these 3 countries. So now what are the findings? So if you see the livelihood, there are few findings what I have mentioned here, but I will not go in detail of this because the previous presenters have already mentioned about it. But there are challenges in terms of livelihoods, there are challenges in terms of health and to the RE businesses. So in itself, from the findings, we can say that yes, there are problem access to water for sanitation, problem for access to healthcare, access to information, access to finance, and the sales and distributions have been a challenge. And of course, the livelihoods and the job creation market has been reduced as expected and as mentioned by several presenters before. So these are the findings. So now the recommendations part. So of course, different stakeholders have different roles to play. Although we cannot say that one particular stakeholder has all the roles, but it has to be a multidimensional and collaborative approach. So there are a number of recommendations being provided by several organizations, including several UN agencies. And I know that that has been compiled at the country level, and based on that, several programs should be created. But for the government actors, what we understand is almost all the governments have started preparing the recovery policies and plans either at the national level or at the provincial level. So what is important is to include and integrate the small-scale renewable energy component in those recovery policies and plans. Because it has already been proven that decentralized and distributed renewables has a greater role in the COVID-19 response. And it needs to be integrated in the policies and plans of the provincial and the national governments. I'm not going in detail of all those recommendations. I'm just picking few of those, just keeping the time into considerations. So for the financial actor, again, when we interacted with several stakeholders at the country level, we understood that there would be several thematic, targeted investment or the financing structure that would be prepared to address to COVID-19 response. So it's important there has to be dedicated investment for small scale clean energy interventions. And it needs to be blended either with public-private financing. So it's important to drive that particular sector by the financing actors. It's also important for technology provider to demonstrate that how decentralized energy can play a very critical role in providing several critical services like clean water, vaccine refrigeration, cold storage, or mobile health clinic centers. Although that has been several demonstration projects and pilot projects which have been implemented, but believe me, this is going to be the most critical, and probably this is the most relevant time for renewable energy sectors to showcase that it can be used for several services at the off-grid as well as at the local level to improve or to revive the local economy and to provide better socio-economic services to the community. And for the civil societies, yes, again, civil society needs to work very closely with the government to bring all those ground reality and to ensure that those ground realities are reflected in the policies and plans. And also, they should work more on creating the institutional framework and the digital platform for promoting renewable energy businesses online. So now this is my last slide, which talks about, although we have number of challenges, but challenges also brings out opportunities. So these are few of the opportunities for decentralized distributed renewable energy sources. Again, as I already mentioned, it needs to be included, integrated in the recovery planning. It has to showcase that how important and how critical it is to integrate renewables for healthcare, for job creations, and food security. And for that, it needs an affordable access to finance, both for the end consumer as well as for small scale SMEs. So what under Empower we are trying to do is working with provincial government and make sure that RE is going to be integrated in those recovery planning. We are also trying to realign few of the Empower activities to see if we can foster more job creations and bring more access to food security, healthcare, and information technologies. We are also going to work more on to see how different business models can be developed to provide more affordable finance. And lastly, but not least, we will work on more on or tweak our training program to see if we can bring more hands-on online training program and capacity building programs to create more local job at the local level and bringing more development at the local scale. So with this, I would stop here, but just to summarize, I would like to say that this is a challenge that the whole global is facing, and we all have to come forward and put our part here and collectively work as a RE community to see how best we can work to address these challenges and how best we can create the impact at the global level. With this, I would stop here. But if you need more information, we have our Empower websites. Please go through the websites. We have number of stories from the ground and other aspects of Empower. And we would be happy to answer any of your questions, queries in future. With this, I will thank all of you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Many thanks, Parimita, for that inspirational presentation. Next, over to Glenn Pierce-Oros, my colleague, my boss, in fact, and the Director for International Relations and Special Projects at Sustainable Energy for All. Glenn, before joining SE4All a few years ago, spent more than 15 years with the World Bank and has work experience from country offices across the globe, ranging from Latin America, Central America, South Asia, Africa. And this morning he has the pleasure of waking up early in Vienna, Austria. So with those few words, over to you, Glenn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mikael, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. It's really my pleasure to be able to join this spotlight session. And for SE4All, we're very happy to be able to partner with the Asian Development Bank on this very important discussion. I do like the way the different speakers have been able to address very specific areas of this question, which is what is Recover Better? And I'd like to provide perhaps some important experience from our side in this discussion, which has to do with what recovering better with sustainable energy is all about. And first and foremost, we need to be able to put this discussion into a language that is well understood by governments. And when we think about what is first and foremost in the mind of governments when they think about Recover Better, it's a lot about jobs and competitiveness for all. We see, for example, in this slide, how COVID-19 has affected the economic contraction in Asia in particular. On the left, we have East Asia and Pacific projections of growth forecast, and we can see how the negative numbers appearing in both East Asia as well in the Pacific Islands. On the right-hand side, South Asia, its growth forecast as we move towards June of 2020, and we see the forecast certainly going in a direction that's not very helpful. But on top of that, many of the countries that depend on tourism, oil, energy exports, SMEs, or deep global value chains are going to experience most of these impacts. So this is what our colleagues in government are facing. In order to be able to speak to those concerns from a position of Recover Better with sustainable energy, we need to start pointing out some of the benefits which Parimita was doing very, very capably in the previous presentation, and focus our discussion on job creation, on health benefits, and on agricultural benefits. And so in this slide, we can easily see how many jobs are directly and indirectly created per $10 million of spending in fossil fuels, in energy efficiency, and in renewable energy technologies. This is a very powerful message to government when talking about the importance of renewable and energy efficiency, because their job creations are 3 times larger than continued investments in fossil fuel, in fossil fuels. In terms of health, certainly the COVID pandemic raises the health issue, and we know that there are still many health clinics across Asia which do not have access to reliable energy, and so the importance of health and energy is going to need to be highlighted in order to address any future wave or any future pandemic that will require efficient cold chains for vaccination, for example, and be able to provide that reliable service. in agriculture, just think about how much food is lost because of lack of food cold chains. Many of us are familiar with this figure. But again, these are good points to bring to the discussion when we need to talk about recover better with sustainable energy and economic stimulus packages. I'd like to turn our attention to one aspect which I think has not been mentioned, or mentioned very very indirectly in this session, which is what is the opportunity in terms of energy efficiency, the first and the cheapest fuel that's available to Asia. Here we see some of the ASEAN countries indicating here in the graphic their progress in terms of energy efficiency over the past 7 years, or from 2010 to 2017. And we see on the dotted line the SDG 7 target, which is 3% annual progress of energy efficiency. And we see how many economies are falling short of that. There's a lot of untapped potential here. Energy efficiency is the cheapest fuel and can also help businesses become even more competitive. And again, this is putting this argument in the language that government will understand immediately. Greater energy efficiency is starting to appear in some of the recovery plans that we have been advising on. And in particular, there are some points which are extremely relevant for the Asian community. One has to do with the creation of jobs and the stimulation of construction that can happen if we focus our attention on energy efficiency in buildings, for example. We know that 50% of the world's new buildings are constructed in Asia. This is a huge amount of construction. Imagine if all that construction were also constructed according to energy efficient standards. We know that job creation goes hand in hand with the construction industry. And we can see or estimate that approximately 2.4 million jobs in Southeast Asia alone would be created with a fully realized energy efficiency investment portfolio. And finally, imagine the competitiveness of more resilient businesses if their square meter floor areas were made more efficient. And this brings me to an important point, which we always consider when we think about energy efficiency, extremely relevant in Asia, for Asian countries, is the cooling imperative, and how sustainable cooling can provide good opportunities both to address equity as well as energy efficiency in Asia. Cooling for all is important to keep in mind. It's more than just about cooling units. It's about where do we find the people who need access to sustainable cooling. They live in rural areas, in urban areas, and are also lower middle income with increasing purchasing power. We know from the most recent statistics that approximately $630 billion are lost annually because of heat stress in Asian economies. And it's estimated that by 2030, 59 million full-time jobs could be lost in Asia. This is a powerful moment in time to make sure that the cooling objectives are also part of a Recover Better with Sustainable Energy program, and a good moment to reset all of the economy towards more energy efficient practices. We do know that the global air conditioner stock is going to increase. And if you look carefully at this graphic, you'll notice that China, India, and Indonesia will account for half of the total number of air conditioning units by 2050. we should look at this as an opportunity of how these countries can demonstrate leadership around the world by developing, by enabling, by making sure that there are more energy efficient space cooling systems available for consumers of all levels in these countries. I'm going to wrap up here, Mikael, but I would like to leave our colleagues with one final point, which is recovering better with sustainable energy is an opportunity for an economy-wide reset. Colleagues earlier have made important points about the off-grid sector. There's also an energy efficiency opportunity here that we cannot lose sight of. We have, SE4All has been developing Recover Better with Sustainable Energy guides for Sub-Saharan Africa. We're developing one for Southeast Asia, and we're developing one for the Caribbean as well. And we hope that these guides, which Damilola alluded to in her opening remarks, can provide a good advice and good structured way for governments to think about how to enable the Recover Better process with sustainable energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn. And now it's my pleasure to invite everybody back into the live session. We'll have a short discussion here, 15 minutes, with all the speakers. So if I may ask Peter thank you, Peter, in the control room to putting us all up here. I'm going to be asking a few questions that we've gotten from the audience, and I'm going to be going in no particular order here. So I'll ask all the participants to be ready for a question here, and perhaps starting off with you, Ben, on clean cooking. In your view, what should governments be looking at to help prioritize clean cooking in their countries and provide access to the billions of people that still suffer from the negative impacts of not having it? So what would be your top 1 to 2 advice to governments? Ben.
Thank you. Whoever put that question, it's a big one, but I'll try and give a short answer. I think there's in the clean cooking sector, and well done to the Clean Cooking Alliance who are trying to bring this forward, getting some really exciting startups and more established enterprises in clean cooking. What I think from a government side will be really great to see is probably 2 things. Number one is a policy setting that promotes clean cooking technologies. So that can be simple things such as VAT exemptions or other tax-related exemptions that help to make it quite competitive. Quite often in a lot of countries, some clean cooking technologies don't have any kind of subsidy available to them, but at the same time, say, fossil fuel generating technologies for cooking or whatever may have subsidies relating to them as well. So trying to at least level the playing field or push it towards clean cooking options, I think is a really good way to go. The second one is obviously there's always great to have some type of sustainable funding support to help lower the cost of some of the upfront costs of those technologies. But I would say also be very careful as policymakers around making that accessible and even to all of the market. We've seen quite a few examples directly and indirectly where there's good intentions, but it's limited to particular suppliers or particular technologies, and it actually makes overall the sustainability of the market worse. So I think good to look at positive interventions, but make sure it's accessible and designed for the whole market.
Thank you, Ben. No, that interesting insights there. Mr. Adhikari, you mentioned also in your presentation the role of local governments, and would be interesting to hear what would be your advice on how we could go about improving cross-government cooperation in advancing the sustainable energy agenda. So what would be the main lessons learned in Nepal and your key recommendation to the audience. Mr. Adhikari, please unmute your microphone.
Yeah, thank you, Mikhail. I think, yeah, we know these off-grid systems are deployed in generally in backward areas which are difficult to reach from the central government. So I think we have 2-3 distinct role to play in different level of the government. One is, I think, the policy should come from the national policy premises that we promote, we support the left over citizens to have access on the clean energy. And we talk about the first access. We normally talk about electricity, but I think the cooking is also very, very important, that the access to clean cooking is more rewarding in many cases in terms of health, the other social aspect, gender issues and all, but still the focus is on the electricity. So I think the central government have clear policies and resource mobilization. Then in terms of implementation of the selection of the project and on ground support, I think the local government could bring a more productive result with a low cost, and of course they will understand their need more clearly, and then they can prioritize which segment and what kind of technologies could fit where. So I think the resource mobilization and policy regimes come from the central government, and implementation and project formulation, supervision, monitoring, and sustainability aspect, livelihood aspect should be coordinated through the local government. So I think in our case, we have just practiced these federal systems. We have divided the role, and we are trying to divide the role in that sense.
Thank you, Mr. Adhikari. Moving on, Praveen, to you in India. In your view, what are the main challenges or possible misconceptions that entrepreneurs face in marketing off-grid solar solutions to customers?
Hi, thanks for the question, Mikhail. So I don't know if there is any misinterpretation, but there are a lot of challenges that people face. First of all, if you go by the government data, India is fully electrified. So therefore, there's not too much coming from the federal government in that sense. So what private players have to really do is to sort of, build their own go-to-market strategy and all the support that they can take from within, kind of. So I think the challenge is also because it's a very large country, and when you talk about off-grid, we are speaking a lot about the rural areas, the last mile, and it is difficult to reach. So even for the established players, it is not so easy to kind of get to the last mile. So I guess that remains a big challenge as to how do you reach products to the far-flung areas. Combined with that is the challenge, of course, from the consumer side. So the last mile consumer, they maybe not capable enough to pay outright for a purchase of a off-grid product. So I think the major challenges are in the area of affordability and supply chain, and that is what the players here are trying to resolve, and have been successful to a large extent. But my advice to anybody who's listening in from outside of India would be that when you come here, please come here with a kind of a full commitment to be in the geography and work the markets directly. That will be the best way to approach the market.
Good. Parimita, women in rural communities have been at the front end on COVID-related economic shocks. What sustainable energy strategies can bring them back in the workforce quickly?
Thanks, Mikhail. It's a very interesting question. So during our survey also, what we found that there are several occasions in Cambodia, Vietnam, and to some extent in Bangladesh, it's women becoming the primary earner of that family. And of course, there are several challenges which are very pertinent or very close to link to women only. For example, access to information. For example, going for the health care or getting the healthcare services has been a challenge for them. And of course, job creations and managing their family at this moment has been a challenge. So what renewable energy can do is, of course, increasing the healthcare services, maybe through a mobile health clinic, or by providing more access to information about their health, about other COVID-related informations, would definitely make them much more empowered. And beyond that, I will also link to Glenn's point that, and what we found is, what they said is, of course, they have lots of, let's say, the vegetable products available, but they don't have the cold storage facilities. And because of which they are losing lots of revenues. So we have to provide those infrastructure and those access to those facilities, which would at least help them in sustain and promote their livelihood options. And then we can think of the other associated things. And of course, access to finance is another challenge, particularly for women, because they generally don't have collaterals or other guaranteed mechanisms. So we have to think of a more affordable and easier way for providing access to finance to women, for bringing them up in this situation.
Thank you, Parimita. And on the topic of unlocking finance, René, in off-grid areas, capacity to pay is often low and therefore high credit risk for project developers. What strategies can be implemented to promote credit to projects in this case?
Well, in terms of the deployment of small power generation facilities in the off-grid areas, including the distribution system, we are implementing this, what we call prepaid metering system in the to make sure that consumers can pay what are their consumption in electricity. So at the same time, it is convenient also for the consumers that they can program their income based on their in the off-grid areas. Most people are part of the informal workers, so their income are very seasonal. So with that, they can program their budget, and they can surely pay their power bills on time. For the utilities, it is also provide convenience, as these are they can eliminate additional workers for collectors and meter readers. And remember that these areas are the hard to reach areas in the country. So they can increase their collection efficiency in the performance of their electrification program in these remote villages. And at the same time, collection efficiency will be increased for the utilities providing service in the off-grid areas. And surely with that in mind, and with that program or planned electrification activities, you can be surely can recover your investment due to high collection efficiency and efficient utilization of electricity based on the demand or the capacity to pay of the people in the off-grid areas. So I think that's all my answer.
Thank you very much, René, and conscious of the time, we are going to run over just with a few minutes, but I wanted to ask one more question to Glenn before handing over to Mr. Yongping Chai. So Glenn, any advice that you would have in mind to MDBs in particular, so the multilateral development banks, and what they could do in prioritizing energy efficiency in their programs in the post-COVID period?
Thank you very much, Mikhail. I think there are probably two areas which are foremost, which present foremost opportunities in terms of how MDBs are looking at this. One has to do with the access that MDBs have directly to ministries of finance, to ministries of economy, to decision makers that are making decisions for the whole of the economy. And this is very important because it's linked to the second opportunity. The second opportunity has to do with how can the energy sectors of MDBs be able to influence the other sectors that need energy for their development. And it's clear with some of the examples that were mentioned, the healthcare example, how sustainable energy is now or should be part of health colleagues' responses from MDBs. From the ag sector, how can energy be part of the rural development responses of MDBs? This, I think, is a pivotal role that our colleagues who are working in multilateral development banks need to focus on and have an opportunity to really help shape the next version of our economy. Thanks.
Thank you, Glenn, and a big thank you to all the speakers today and to our partner organizations and the Asia Clean Energy Forum team, and obviously our host, the ADB. And now I have the pleasure to handing over the microphone to Mr. Chai for the concluding remarks of this session. So over and out from me, and over to you, Mr. Chai.
Thank you very much, Michael, for moderating this morning's session. It's been very successful and informative. I learned a lot, but before I share my last thought, to conclude the session, I would like to thank first Sustainable for All for co-hosting this event. And I would like to thank all the panelists, experts here, to bring us the latest voices from the field that we need to understand before we can implement a lot of actions, as Mr. Glenn has just suggested, to MDBs. I think for us, the first thing is to understand the issues. I think for that, I have learned a lot. I will share that with my colleagues who are here also. That will help us to shape our actions as well. Now back to the discussions we have had this morning. I've been thinking that even before the pandemic, the space of energy access, say clean cooking, for example, it's been a difficult challenge, even in Asia, where we have achieved more or less, we're close to achieve 100% universal access by 2030. I think we're moving toward that, but I don't think Asia will be able to meet the target of universal access for clean cooking. That's even prior to the pandemic. And we're thinking that what will be the solution for this space. Of course, there are also issue of clean heating and sustainable cooling as well. So all these issues have been difficult challenges for us, how to make this, in this space, ADB can be more active and providing more support. We have been exploring ways and making pilot studies and some pilot projects in different countries, including the Philippines. Our friend has just mentioned this morning. However, after the pandemic, we have seen that there are more issues we have to deal with. And that's actually related to issues beyond just energy sector. We have seen that connection with the health sector, connection with agriculture, transport, that's obvious. So imagine that the time we will have the vaccine, how make sure these vaccines reach millions and millions of people in rural areas. Then the solar powered cold chain and other technologies will be important for us. So it's a challenge more than before, but also opportunities for us to explore, as many speakers have mentioned, that we can expand our cooperation activities and support beyond the power sector, beyond the clean cooking. Is difficult, but I think there are technologies that will be made available. ADB will continue to work on this space. I also appreciate the suggestions that all stakeholders should work together, including the government, the technology providers, the civil societies, and financiers as ourselves. I think it's important for us, all of us, to work together and to find this solution in this very challenging space. And that made even more challenging by the pandemic. But I'm quite optimistic. If we all work together, we'll find a solution. I appreciate our cooperation with SE4O for a long time and for future. And I hope we can have all these kind of discussions more often. I would like to invite our colleagues SE4O to share more experience across the globe, because you are more than Asia. We are just Asian bank, but you can share more experience, success stories, business models from other parts of the world. And that's a value of sustainable for all, and that value of our cooperation. We will continue to work together. And thank you all, and thank you all the audience who have been patient with us this morning. Thank you.